Kia ora and welcome to another episode of Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams, a podcast exploring the lives and minds of theatre practitioners in and around the Aotearoa performing arts industry. My name is James Shearer and today I have an amazing episode for you. I'm joined by Richard Marrett. Richard is an absolute legend in the performing arts industry in New Zealand. He's a music director, pianist and arranger, an educator, and just an all-round inspiring person. He definitely helped me get my start in the industry as the program leader of NASDA while I was there, and he's been at the top of the game in Christchurch and around New Zealand for a long time. In this conversation we chat about Richard's early days in Levin performing as a baritone for the school choir. We also chat about conductors nowadays being part of the band rather than the more traditional way of conducting with the baton and everything. And we also get some insight into how Richard feels about his legacy and all the careers that he's played a part in building. I'm so excited for you to hear this episode. I hope you enjoy. And without further ado, here is Richard Marrett on Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams.
I had to listen to some of your previous ones. I listened to the one with Zach. Yeah. I just thought I'd have a couple of minutes listen, and I ended up listening to the whole thing. So,
yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. One new listener. I'm very curious for your answer to this question, which is, what is your favorite musical? Very difficult question.
Yes, you are not the first person to ask me that. In fact, I meet that question so often. Just for some context, I've conducted or played somewhere around 70 to 80 different musicals over my time, and 55 of those I think are discrete musicals and the rest are repeats. So It's pretty hard to choose, to be honest. Sometimes I've given the answer that my favorite musical to be part of and to have been on the creative team for is actually Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Funnily enough. I say funnily enough because it was a show I didn't actually think I wanted to do particularly.
Yeah.
But you don't turn down work, so I did it. And I just love the music so much. And because the MD's role doubles playing the first keyboard part, all that disco music and everything, which was right in my era from when I was younger, that was such fun that I would have to say that was my favorite experience, being in front of a musical. Unexpected as it is.
We love unexpected. You grew up in Levin, correct?
Yes. Where did you get that information from?
Well, I may have listened to the Garden of Sound interview that you did.
Right.
And a lot of my research was listening to that.
So. Yes, I grew up in Levin. It was actually a really great town. In the 70s, it was a great place to bring up a family. So I was there almost all my young life, and then I moved to Wellington after that to go to university.
Did you do much in the way of performing arts in that time growing up?
Was pretty involved at high school with stuff there. I recall my friend Andrew Sewell, who actually is a conductor in the States. He's conductor of Wichita Orchestra, and he and I were basically the males in the school choir. So he sang the tenor part and I sang the bass part, or tried to, and that was kind of how things were in those days. Small numbers, and not many boys wanted to take part. I did have some great experiences at high school, though. which was where my kind of interest in musicals was kindled. There was a teacher there who decided one day that we would write the school musical, and he suggested that he write half the score and I write the other half, and we do it together.
Right.
And it was kindness like that really got me started, actually. So it was all kind of homegrown and probably not very good, but it was a beginning.
Is this the same teacher that learnt instruments and then kind of handed them off to their
that actually was another teacher. That was the first teacher was head of the maths department, actually. And he was a hobbyist pianist. And the other teacher who got me started was the school music teacher, my third form music teacher. And she was a great inspiration. And she used to, as you say, learn a bit of an instrument enough to pass on her knowledge and the instrument to interested students, and taught them as much as she could before she passed them on to another teacher. And she sort of built up her school orchestra that way. And I was, needless to say, really inspired by her method, and the lucky recipient of her care as well. Yeah.
Is that something that you've kind of taken into your like not learning different instruments and stuff, but kind of having those inspiring teachers and bringing that forward into your teaching of other students? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think essentially that is a teacher's job, isn't it? To inspire people, whatever that may mean. And my relationship to music has always been one where I haven't derived the most pleasure from simply performing or participating myself as much as I have enabling other people to do great work.
Sure.
And so I think I was always a teacher first for that reason. Even as a pianist, my favorite thing is to play for singers, rather than sit on the concert platform and entertain that way. So it's always about making other people sound good. I haven't really loved being a composer nearly as much as I've loved arranging other people's work. So that's always been my relationship to music. It's making other people's work better, and that's my work. So if I'm good at that sometimes, then it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah. Speaking of like one of your passions being playing for singers, that's kind of how you got into the profession, isn't it? Like,
yes,
you
it was.
Played for that.
I played I played for an audition for a colleague, and it was one of those kind of cute jazzy numbers from, I think, Anything Goes. And it was a couple of days after the audition that it turned out that the friend I'd played for their audition didn't get a call back, but I did. And the suggestion was that I come and be the pianist, the rehearsal pianist for the show. And and also got to play in the pit as well. And that was that was the start of it all, really. So I found that I was doing exactly what I wanted to do all along, to be involved in musicals and playing for singers in the rehearsal room. I think the greatest buzz actually in playing rehearsal for that show is playing for the tap routines. Playing this tiny little upright piano in a room full of tap dancers going for it. It's a real buzz. It's also a bit terrifying because you're not sure who's trying to keep in time with whom. but
Yeah, true.
but very energizing.
Yeah, totally. A quick intermediary question before we move on. So as we've said, you've done, between 70 to 80 different shows. Is there a show that you haven't done yet that you would really love to MD or be a part of?
I guess I would have to say I'd love a crack at Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's in my future or not. But I'm so kind of blessed with the assortment of things that have come my way that I'm not really hanging out for anything. There are some shows that I just haven't been in the right place at the right time for. For example, I think I'd love to do a West Side Story sometime.
Yeah.
It's just the way things have gone that I've never been able to do one of those. But that's another thing that is kind of a bucket list for most music theatre conductors.
Yeah, totally.
But there's nothing I'm hanging out for, except, as I say, I'd like to try Hamilton.
Wouldn't we all?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned you moved to Wellington to study. Was that studying music or?
Yeah. I did a Bachelor of Music. It was primarily in musicology, orchestration, a bit of composition. And at the same time, I was on a scholarship, which they used to have in those days for aspiring teachers. So the agreement was that after you'd finished your degree, that you would be bonded to the government and have to teach in the area that you had studied. So I studied music and English with a view to being a secondary music specialist, and taught English as my second subject. Yeah.
How was that experience? Like, obviously, with you now being in education as your profession, compared to that, how was the experience of actually learning and going through that process?
Well, the way it was done then is you didn't do any training as a teacher until after you had done your degree. So it was 3-year degree, followed by a 1-year teachers training college course.
Yeah.
For the first year, I didn't actually take the money because I didn't want to get in a position where I changed my mind and thought, don't want to be a teacher anymore. So I went through the first year living on $21 a week or whatever it was in those days.
Yeah.
And then decided, this is crazy, because who are you kidding? You are a born teacher, you want to teach, and that's what you'll probably do until you're 100. So take the money and that. So so I ended up being bonded for 3 years in total. But it was the need to go to teachers college to a specialist music teacher training course that brought me to Christchurch. I moved down here for that 1 year, and that was the plan, just to have 1 year in Christchurch, because I'd never been here, and never left.
Never left.
Yeah.
Fast forward however many years, and you go back to study a master's in music.
Oh yes, yeah. I guess that's possibly part and parcel of the whatever thing that resembles a midlife crisis for an educator. But while I was working at NASDA at Ara, discussions were being had about providing postgraduate opportunities for our students. So I thought it would be a good idea to put myself through such a course as a guinea pig. I was also blessed with the opportunity to take a year sabbatical, study leave to do that. So I did that partly for the job and partly for myself. Yeah. And it turned out to be a really fulfilling time. And the upshot of it was once I went back to work in the program, that we were able to introduce the local delivery of those same courses, the
totally.
BA Honours and MA in music. Yeah.
So before we move on to NASDA and all that stuff, another question. There's something that I ask performers that come on the podcast is, what is your dream miscast role?
Yeah.
But do you have a dream miscast show that you think you like? I mean, we've already talked about like Priscilla, obviously. That was something that you've done that was, I'm not right for this, but then you end up doing it and you love it.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I talked to you during our Jesus Christ Superstar season about We Will Rock You, which was kind of the similar situation.
Yeah.
So is there another show that you think, oh, I'm not right for this?
I flippantly thought that 6 would be a good one to answer that question with, because I think they always have female MDs. So I'm definitely miscast for that. I did prepare an answer to your original question, which was about a miscast role. And
go for it.
Funnily enough, not that I have ever coveted a role of any actor that I worked with, because I don't claim to be a very competent singer at all, nor actor.
Anyone who's been in a rehearsal room would disagree, but go on.
So the one show that I did that I would really have dearly loved to have played a role in was that of End of the Rainbow, which was had primarily the Judy Garland character and her accompanist, musical director Anthony. And I loved doing that show, and I actually played that role from behind the curtain. In other words, the amazing Roy Snow was playing the role, and he was pretending to play the piano, and I was delivering all the notes. It was such a convincing fake that we ended up getting a review that praised him for his phenomenal piano styling. But I really wished I had been a capable enough actor to have actually done that role, and done the whole thing. There are a few roles like that have been created for MDs, actor musicians. And that's one of the ones that it would have been nice to have had the skills to do it, but I'm not under any illusion that I ever would. Mainly because I can't ever remember anything, because when you're dealing with a lot of music, when you've got a lot of show music going through your hands, you rely entirely on reading everything.
Yeah, totally.
And you don't memorize a thing. So my powers of memorization are 0 because of that.
Yeah. Okay, so moving into career stuff. Again, this is from Garden of Sound interview. So you were sitting in the audience of Evita.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of watching the show, you were watching the conductor and thinking, how can I be that guy?
Mm-hmm. That's how it happened.
Which I think is so like Like you kind of in that moment knew
Yeah.
what life was going to be, you know?
Well, I think with musicals, the thing that's special about the form to me is that it predominantly deals with modern music, with contemporary music. So stylistically, it's a collection of a whole lot of contemporary, whatever you believe that to be, music from whatever era the show is in. That always appeals to my particular interest in music. I was never fascinated by classical music the same way that I am about more contemporary music. But the thing about it is you need a classical musician's understanding of how to go about creating that form or recreating that form. So the skills are finely, tuned, and they come from the study of classical technique and principles of harmony and all that kind of thing. So it was the first time I'd seen something that seemed to be the best of both worlds, and it seemed to encapsulate all the skills that I thought I had, as well as the desire to perform, but to perform in a way that you're helping other people rather than you're putting yourself out front and center, even though that's where the conductor is.
That's where you are.
It's not about you, it's about what you get out of everybody else, musicians and cast as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, you do a lot more shows between that and the next stage, but at some point you get called into MD and play for NASDA shows. So how did that kind of come about?
Well, I was doing 2 or 3 shows a year in the community, and the personnel were kind of crossing over. Became good friends with Michael Lee Porter, who is a colleague who is now working in Australia. And so initially I was coming in to do the things that he couldn't do, either because he couldn't fit them into his program or whatever. And so it was a kind of a relief sort of job.
Sure.
I got a couple of shows with the NASDA students before that. I think my first show at NASDA was Little Abner. And that was before NASDA moved to the College of Education. But once it was at the College of Ed, I started doing quite a few things. I think we did Into the Woods. I did the first MTE's Music Theatre Ensemble experiences. Yeah, so it was all care, no responsibility, part-time work, because by this stage I had left my high school teaching and decided to just try and be a music director, be a musician. And I think I had about 12 part-time jobs at once. By the time I was teaching at the Christchurch Jazz School, teaching English at a high school, doing the shows at NASDA, teaching musicianship at NASDA, and I was music director for a church. So all of those grouped together to be a kind of a decent job. It was exhausting.
Totally.
I did that for about 11 years, I think, that kind of part-time jobbing. And then once Michael Lee Porter left to go and join the cast of Phantom in Australia, NASDA or ARA offered me a full-time position. So I just grabbed that with both hands, because the idea of not having to go out hustling for work all the time and just having a regular salary come to me and still be able to do the things that I loved, it seemed like a great opportunity. So that was how the NASDA years started for me.
Yeah, sure. And how was that process transitioning into program leader? Was it like, because you were doing all the bunch of different stuff with them already, was it kind of easy to just transition into the program leader?
Yeah, I did. I worked for a couple of years not as the program leader. The thing about NASDA in those days was just a fantastic team who had really refined their ability to work as a team to bring out the best in students. And so we were all, as staff, constantly learning from each other. And so what we ended up was a kind of system of messaging and of working with the students, which was quite coherent, and we were all talking the same language. And so I really loved that. And in those days, the role of program leader was just literally one of the team in the program ended up being responsible for everything else. So it was quite a collegial thing. But I felt, because we'd all been working together so closely and knew what our priorities were with one another in our work, I found it pretty easy to make that transition. And I did that for, I think, about 6 or 7 years, possibly. And then I took the year off.
Obviously, being a part of NASDA for so long and being a part of the educational music theatre world in Christchurch, even like almost all of my guests have been taught by you. Do you ever like think about how much impact you've had on like the scene down there? What is it?
Well, in as modest a way as I can, I do think about that. I thought about that a lot when I left. You know, it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, because it was time to move on, and I was keen to leave and go back to being a musician again.
Yeah.
And so at that time, you do look back and assess. And I realized that I actually wasn't feeling terribly sentimental or emotional about leaving the place.
Sure.
Because I realized that all the investment is in the people who have gone through. And what would that be? I suppose it'd be 200 or 300 students in that time. And so, I mean, you throw around big words like legacy, but you can do that when you're as old as I am. And that is definitely the legacy. Even just 2 people who might meet up in years to come and say, oh yeah, I was taught by him as well. That is a thing. And it is where you derive a lot of, what do we call it? Job satisfaction. It's knowing that you've helped people that way. And I was quite surprised once I left that if I went past the building, if I went in, I just felt nothing. You know, that famous line from Chorus Line, there was just nothing. And I was quite surprised at that. But when I stop and look at the list of people that you've interviewed, and I go to a show somewhere else and see someone who's graduated from our program, then I feel really sentimental and very nostalgic and obviously proud. Yeah,
totally. During our Jesus Christ Superstar season was kind of when that process was happening, and I love what you said to us. I remember you said, like, instead of teaching new people in the industry, you want to work with the people that you've taught.
Yeah.
which was just like essentially what you're saying, but like, yeah, really, really cool.
And that's the thing. People move from being your students to being your colleagues, and that transition's almost seamless. Who knows when that actually happens. And I don't in the least bit find that difficult at all, because this is what you prepared them for. I remember we had a reunion at NASDA. I think it was 2014. It's the 20-year reunion, and we had a number of students come back, and we put them together in a chorus just to sing something. And it just locked together so well that I realized that all these people in this room have all gone through the same filter, and they've had the same lectures from me over and over again about their placement and their vowel sounds and their onset and everything else, that they just knew how to lock together and work as a unit because they'd all had the same experience. And those are nice moments. And when a cast gets together and it's got a lot of people who've been through the same thing as well, then half the work's done for you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, one of the other questions that people ask me is what is my favorite part about working on a musical? And I guess they might be expecting me to say, the fabulous orchestras that I get to lead every night, or the amazing icons of New Zealand acting who get to be on the stage in our productions. But honestly, my favorite part of the whole process is working with the ensemble and getting a great ensemble sound. And that hasn't changed for years. I don't think it ever will. Yeah, it's still my favorite part.
Yeah. And also like trying to get that sound to be like really tight and really on point. Where do you think that the dedication to that tight sound comes from?
I think it's about one of the things I've always thought is that because I wasn't naturally a very good singer, I set about learning how good singers produce sound, how they change. And so when you hear great choral sound or ensemble sound, I've been able to analyze and look at what makes that happen, rather than just assume that when you get a whole lot of good people together, you will automatically get a tight or full sound. So part of it is leading well and doing it in such a way that people think it's their idea. Some people could say that it's the control freak in me or what, I don't know. But for me, it's just about ensemble music is like working like one voice. And so everyone's got to get the same message, and everyone's got to work to the same cutoffs and the same breaths and all that kind of thing, and the same vowel shapes and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of saying there are lots of ways we could do this, but we'll do this way, and I'd like you all to do it the same way. And then, of course, you experience what it's like to sing with that kind of unity, and
Totally.
and everyone goes, that's what this is all about. That feels awesome.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a thing that I've developed over the years, and it's just a particular interest of mine.
Yeah. And I think it's really beneficial for a cast, when they move out of, not being with you as a musical director, like just keeping those structures and togetherness with the rest of the ensemble, I guess, is what it is.
Well, also it's teaching them to work with whoever is the musical director, because if you don't provide strong leadership and say, this is how we want it to sound, people will just do their own thing. And they always have to be reminded to come back and check in and look.
Yeah.
Because in a musical, a cast isn't looking at the MD all the time. And so you've got to train them what are the important points at which you do need to check in so that you get that result. And of course, in recent times, the MD is more often than not stuck behind the keyboard as well. Yeah. So they can't even conduct the minutiae of all of that. Therefore, it's got to be drilled at the learning part of the process so that you still get that result. And you still have people depending on you for certain decision points. And that's kind of the hallmark of a really professional sound.
Yeah.
It's harder and harder to produce that if people insist on just doing their own thing. And I'm too busy acting to actually check in with what the music director's doing, which can be a bit of a problem in musical theatre, of course.
Yeah, that's interesting what you say about the, being more and more that the conductor is also playing the first keyboard or whatever. Why is that? Why has that transition happened more recently?
It's actually a budget thing, to be honest, because over the years, if you think back to Broadway and you think of the theatres which had house orchestras, it had orchestra minimum, so you had to have an orchestra of a certain size and all these things because the union movement is very strong there. So the conventions were fairly immovable, and so the size of the orchestra that went with the size of the individual theatre kind of in most cases would expect a conductor in the mix. Yeah. But over time, those numbers have been negotiated down to the point where I think at the time of recording, I'd say a large pit orchestra on Broadway would be considered 14. Mm-hmm. And so to get that same richness and fullness out of the orchestrations, there's got to be a lot of rewriting, a lot more doubling, and you have to have a lot more keyboard programming done. So, so some shows, some of the big shows will have 3 or 4 keyboard parts, and so if the conductor plays one of those, then that is one less musician that you have to hire. So in some shows like, say, Priscilla, which we're talking about, that's easy because it's a rock music, pop music based thing and everything's the same tempo and you're not constantly nodding your way through tempo changes all the time. The other way that it is sometimes done is they will write a second or third keyboard part for the conductor. Jesus Christ Superstar touring version is like that, where the conductor plays third keyboard, which is kind of full of leftover bits and pieces that have to be fitted in. And so it's not a full part. So you're not leading from a really full piano rhythm section part, and you're just playing bits and pieces, leaving one hand free to do cueing and that kind of thing. But it's all a budget thing, and it's more the go-to now. It's also an interesting thing to observe that is why most of the MDs on Broadway or West End or whatever are pianists. It's true. It's more rare for, say, a bass player or a drummer to become an MD in a show just because of this reliance on the keyboard skills. What's more, the deputies, the understudy assistant conductors, are usually from among the keyboardists.
Yeah. Mm. Do you prefer that style, like playing and conducting, or is it different for every show?
It depends on the show. Depends on the show.
Yeah.
Some shows, that's the most fun way to do it. Some shows like Les Mis or Wicked, or I would hate not to be able to stick conduct those shows because they are just so dependent on good leadership for the orchestra and the cast, and the whole thing moves around so much. So there's nothing like the thrill of doing either of them for the right show.
For the right show.
Quite often in a small theatre, such as the Court Theatre, you don't have a choice. There would be no sense in trying to budget for a stick conductor, because you can only afford a small number of musicians to be present. And so, do I sometimes get in the position of having to lead some shows from the keyboard, which I wish I didn't? The answer would probably be yes. But increasingly, shows are designed to be produced that way anyway. So we're
okay. So we got one listener question.
Oh, goodness.
And you'll probably be able to guess who it was from when I ask it. The question was, who's the best director you've ever worked with, and why is it Dan Bain from The Arsonists?
Oh, I don't think there is any way that I could truthfully answer that question without getting into trouble one way or another. I am really thrilled that Dan Bain was keen to work with me on the project that we did do. I thought that was great, and we had a really good time putting that together. I've worked with a number of directors, but some directors I've worked with over and over again. Of course, people might be surprised to hear that I do really enjoy working with different people all the time. So I'm not going to mention any names. But
well, I guess a more kind of a different way to put it is what qualities in a director do you like working with?
Oh, okay. Quite often I find a director might not have had as much experience in musicals as they have in straight plays or other forms. And what I really appreciate there is their willingness to kind of collaborate and learn from me about those aspects of their craft, which might be slightly different in approach when you're working on a musical. So that's always been good when a director kind of relies on you for input on those things, because they, for one better or worse, think you might be something of an expert in the area. But I think I prefer that to going and working with somebody who thinks they know everything and they kind of try and do your job for you.
Totally.
So it's just about a two-way communication thing. What I also appreciate is the director letting me know what their concept and vision is and how that affects the music, to give me a chance to sort of respond to that. Because it's often easy to just assume that you all know what you're trying to create here. But when a director has a particularly new look or perspective on it, then I like the chance to be able to contribute ways that I could help enhance that, rather than just sort of be responsible for making sure everyone learns their stuff and we just deliver it the same way as it's, done everywhere else. So yeah. Especially as time goes on, because I'm starting to repeat so many shows, so many of the classics, that I'm all up for a fresh take on something.
Totally. Yeah. Moving towards the end of the thing, we kind of already answered this question, but it's hard to pick favorites of shows that you've done and everything. But is there one show that sticks out as that was an amazing process?
Yeah. I really couldn't single one out at all.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some thrills, some exciting experiences, and generally they have been to do with having to go in and rescue someone else's show. There was an incident recently where I had to go and conduct a Les Mis at one day's notice. So right. I got to conduct the last dress rehearsal, and then the season. In a funny kind of way, I really loved being put to the test that way. It was a great test of my skills and calmness and the patience of everybody else. But we got there in the end. But once again, I didn't expect to come out of that experience and say, well, that was a positive thing. And I've done that a couple of times before as well, helped out where needed. And that's always been kind of exciting way to go about making it. The rest of the shows that I've done follow a fairly predictable format. But I think the thing that's really encouraging is I feel excited about every show as I'm doing it. I mean,
sure. Some
of the shows we've done at the Court Theatre over the years, for example, I think of The Producers it was a long time ago now, but it was a totally impossible ask to put such a big show on such a tiny stage with such a tiny budget. But that was thrilling just because we pulled it off,
Sure.
Things like that. But I still, when I work at the court, I still often get so wrapped up in the show that I think this is going to be the best one. This is going to be the best experience. And of course, that ends up getting usurped by the next one. But I think it's quite encouraging that while I'm still doing this, while I'm in that moment, that I do feel like that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus Christ Superstar was a good example. That was a version of the show which none of us could have seen coming, and it was just a great achievement to have presented that in such a different way. So at the time, I thought that was the best thing ever, And then I went on. I've done Jersey Boys since then, and that was an amazing ride as well. Because the other thing to remember is I only really get to work on shows which are already proved to be good.
Yeah.
Because the way pro-am theatre sort of works in this country, companies only take the risk on shows which they know are going to be good sellers anyway.
Yeah.
It's only drama schools that can afford to do things that are a bit risky. So I already know that a show is going to be good before I do it, because for all those reasons. So I'm pretty lucky, really.
So this podcast is called Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams, based around performing and being in this world as a Kiwi. So my question to you is, what is your Kiwi dream?
My Kiwi dream is to be producing theatre which people continue to say would be good if found on any of the other stages around the world.
Mm-hmm.
People say that all the time. You know, it's a quite a cliche. You know,
Yeah.
I saw this show and it was as good as it could be, or it was as the one I saw on Broadway or whatever.
Yeah,
you know,
it's in all
so
the
people do
Facebook
say
comments.
that, and I know that you know, I know that that's not true, but I think the spirit of that is true in terms of what we do here. It was quite a few years ago that I was considering a move to Australia because I knew that if I wanted to work purely in musical direction as a professional, that I would need to go there to get the work. But I made a conscious decision to stay here because I really thought everything that I could ever want was possible here. And I think that's proven to be true.
Absolutely.
I also feel incredibly lucky to have had the opportunities that I have and the continuity of work and the loyalty of performers and companies alike. And for me, I don't know if many people can get to say this, but what I am doing and what I've done was my dream all along. Like, there is nothing else beyond here that I've aspired to because I am lucky enough to be one of those ones who's doing everything I dreamed about doing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome.
Okay, James.
That's the dream.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for coming on the podcast.
It's been my pleasure.
And thank you to you, listener, for listening. And we'll talk to you next time with another amazing guest. Bye.
Thanks, James.
No worries. Thank you. Cut. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed talking to Richard. I just loved getting his thoughts on his own career and little insights into the industry at the moment. It was a really great conversation and I hope you liked it. So you can find Richard on Facebook. Just search Richard Marrett MD. That's his Facebook page. And he's also got, a bunch of things in the works, as he always does. At the end of the year, he is MDing Something Rotten for the Court Theatre, which he's already started recording the music for. So you know that it's going to be good with 6 months of him working on the music. So head along and see Something Rotten when it goes to the Court Theatre. You can also follow this podcast on social media. I highly recommend going to the Instagram because I post little snippets of each episode on there. So that is Kiwi Dreams Pod on Instagram. And it's the same handle for Facebook and Twitter as well. So follow me on all the socials. Feel free to share this episode with a friend who you think might enjoy it. I don't know if there's anyone in the music theatre industry that wouldn't enjoy this conversation, so please share it around. And that's it. Have a great day, and I'll talk at you next time on Broadway and Other Kiwi Dreams.